Mills, for any updates or news briefings, join up on the WNST text service. It is all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard, and it will be hot out there. And we're only hoping that the heat will pick up on the Orioles' bats, which seem to have departed as the Colorado Rockies took 2 out of 3 games from the Birds at Oriole Park at Camden Yards. Here to talk all things Orioles, as well as a little bit of Ravens, Luke Jones. You can reach him, Luke, at WNST.net, as well as Baltimore Luke out on Twitter. Electric night for Dylan Bundy on Wednesday night. However, the Orioles' bats were not cooperating as they now head off onto the road again.
No doubt about it. I mean, Dylan Bundy, and anyone who just looks at the final box score and you just briefly see, okay, 3 earned runs over 5 2/3 innings, you say, well, that doesn't sound all that special. But anyone who watched him pitch, there was a buzz at Camden Yards. I mean, he gets perfect through 5 innings, retires the first 16 hitters he faced, 8 strikeouts in doing so. That was special. I mean, that as much as we've seen, other teams, you look at the Mets with Syndergaard and Matt Harvey over the last few years, and DeGrom, and just look all around baseball, young starters. We've talked, so many different prospects the Orioles have had. Not even Kevin Gausman has turned in the kind of start to an outing that Dylan Bundy provided on Wednesday night. I mean, that there was a buzz at Camden Yards.
When you don't give up any hits and you don't walk guys, and that creates its own energy in any ballpark, but especially when it's your guy that you've been talking about for 5 years, and very few people had seen him pitch before April, right?
Right. I mean, it was just really exciting. And, it's one thing if you pitch 5 1/3 perfect innings and, you only have a couple strikeouts and they're just hitting balls right to your defense, and your defense is making plays. Bundy struck out 8 over that time, and the pitch count wasn't outrageous. He was more economical with his pitches. Ended up finishing with 89 pitches in 5 2/3 innings, but he was on a better pace than that until that 6th inning. And, some people talked about did he run out of gas? Well, it's hard to continue to be perfect, especially when your offense isn't getting you any runs. He walks Mark Reynolds, and he just elevated a changeup to Nick Hundley. And it's funny because then he gave up another home run on another changeup where you say, okay, well, maybe you shouldn't have thrown the changeup. David Dahl, their rookie sensation who just got caught up, hits his first major league home run. But I think anyone who's watched Bundy over the last couple outings especially, that changeup has been so good for him. And it's amazing. He didn't start throwing that thing until he got to minor league baseball. I mean, he had not thrown a changeup really in high school. It was fastball, cutter, curve for him. So that changeup has been such a good pitch for him. But he got 2 changeups up in the strike zone, and that was the difference in him giving up 3 runs. Unfortunate for him. But, the big story of the game is the Orioles continuing to struggle to score runs. Since the All-Star break, they're averaging 2.8 runs per game, and especially in the 4th and 5th inning on Wednesday night, 0 for 6 with runners in scoring position in 2 innings. 0 for 6. I mean, it doesn't get any worse than that. They had opportunities. They couldn't cash them in. So, really, I mean, Bundy takes the loss, but he deserved much, much better. And you mentioned the hot temperatures. You would hope the Orioles' bats heat up sooner rather than later. I think they will, and you certainly hope they will by the weekend as that 3-game set in Toronto looms after this one-day strange make-up trip in Minnesota.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. He pitches so well, and as you pointed out, a couple of bad, hangers in the 6th inning after being perfect for a period of time, but such is a lesson for a young pitcher, right? I mean, what you did in the 4th inning is not going to help you in the 6th inning, especially if your team's not scoring runs.
Yeah, and it was, and as I tweeted at WNST, I mean, this was a reminder, the 6th inning specifically was a reminder that he's still a work in progress as it relates to a full workload as a pitcher. Now, did he give up the 2 home runs because he was exhausted and Buck Showalter should have taken him out? Well, I don't think anyone wanted Buck to take him out while he still had a perfect game or even while he still had a no-hitter after walking Reynolds. The pitch count was still manageable as it related to his previous outing where he threw 87 pitches. So I think whether he was tired or whether he just made a couple bad pitches, I mean, perfection is not what you expect from anyone, let alone someone making his third major league start. So, but it was a reminder that he's not a finished product yet. He even acknowledged that in the post game, but it was really fun watching him do what he did because it's one thing to see him work out of the bullpen the way he did, and he's contributed all year. I mean, he from the time late May rolled around where they started giving him regular rest, you saw the strikeout spike, you saw the velocity spike, and this guy really became a factor for them out of the bullpen. We've talked so much about the desperation that they have as it relates to their rotation, and there's no denying that. That's the primary reason why he was inserted in the rotation, but I think you see what he's been able to do his last two starts after a rough go of it against Tampa Bay in his first start, and you see a guy who's absolutely giving them a chance to win. And the start against Cleveland, 5 innings, you'll take that, understanding where he is with his pitch count right now, and pitching into the 6th inning on Wednesday night, you'll take that from Dylan Bundy, even if he's going to pitch to a 4.5 ERA, hypothetically speaking, and I think he can pitch to much better than that. But it's just a reminder, work in progress, but that work and that progress he's making, really, really fun to watch, and easily could have had a win had the Orioles just had a decent offensive showing, especially in those 4th and 5th innings. Worth pointing out that John Gray, the Rockies starter, 3rd overall pick in the 2013 draft. I mean, this is a
stud is the word I was using, right? I mean, he better be their hope. If they're ever going to win, he's got to be their Tillman, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's a really nasty slider, and he pitched well, but at the same time, he wasn't so dominating where the Orioles weren't having their opportunities. I mean, those 4th and 5th innings, you got to cash in with at least a couple runs there. They squandered bases loaded, 1 out in the 4th, and then in the 5th inning they get a leadoff double from Wieters, and 3 straight batters could do nothing with it. So, even just a few runs there, you do wonder if maybe Bundy settles in, relaxes a little bit more, not quite the same intensity level in the 6th inning there if he has a 2 or 3 run lead, and perhaps it's a little different outcome. But very much encouraged with what I saw from Dylan Bundy. And this offense, you just keep waiting for it to wake up. We knew they weren't going to continue to score at the rate that they scored in June, and at the rate they hit home runs in June, but it's been the opposite extreme in July. They've really scuffled, and I think what you can take some solace in, if I paint a little more of a positive picture. First of all, Toronto and Boston both lost on Wednesday, so the Orioles didn't lose anything in terms of their lead, but they missed an opportunity to increase their lead. But when you look at how this month of July has played out, the Orioles, despite the fact that they've been so miserable with the bats relative to what we've seen them do for most of the season, and keep in mind, in May they didn't go crazy with the bats either. They had some struggles there, but this team still hovering right around they're 11-11 in July, despite the fact that they've scored so poorly, and they can credit their pitching for picking it up there some. So you hope they snap out of it. I think they will. I don't think they're going to be in a position where Chris Davis continues to go through 1 for 27 stretches like he's in right now, and Mark Trumbo at 0 for his last 17. And it's not just those two. Really, everyone's had their struggles.
But it's a lot harder when those guys go cold and you've got runners in scoring position.
Oh, sure.
I mean, it's nice they've had runners in scoring position. Now, at some point, you got to get a big hit.
Oh, there's no doubt about it, and they know that. I mean, so many fans are frustrated, and I get that because Wednesday was absolutely a winnable game. There's no doubt about it. This is only their 2nd home series loss of the year, which one speaks to how amazing they've been at home.
Yeah, it is August, right?
Yeah, I mean, right. So a little bit of perspective there, but at the same time, you do this weird trip in Minnesota, but then going to Toronto, where Toronto had their hands full with San Diego, so I'm not saying the Orioles should be overly intimidated, but we do know Rogers Center, tough place to play, and that Blue Jays lineup has certainly heated up over the last 6 to 7 weeks. So be interesting, and certainly they'll be facing some good pitching over the weekend at Rogers Center as well.
Meanwhile, we got football going on. Luke will be out in Owings Mills. I'll be out there buzzing around as well. If you're out, say hello. You can always find us out on our social media, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. Wherever you might be out on your phone, we'll be there. Plenty of people will be out there putting pictures up, and we were out there with Joe Flacco, who looks the part, I guess, at this point. Looks like he's ready to play. Looks like there's some confidence, not a lot of trepidation, which we would expect from the confidence of Joe Flacco. And John Harbaugh kind of sitting around and talking some football with some people. And, for me, this is one of the more fascinating training camps because I don't know what this team's going to be, right? Like, I can look at it and make some case that they're going to win 12, 13 games if every single part works and these guys all step up. You can also make the case that they're in a lot of trouble and they got a lot of question marks because they really do kind of have a lot of question marks, right?
Yeah, as I wrote this at WNST.net about a week ago, I can't recall a season where the Ravens had this many questions. Now, they have upside. I mean, you just said it. I think I'd be surprised if they won 13 games.
Sure.
But I wouldn't be shocked to see them have 11 wins and be back in the AFC contention picture. I mean,
well, as you remember, so many of these games, and the fans kind of forget it when it goes away for 9 months. Every one of these games is a field goal. Every one of these games is the ball hit the safety in his hands and he dropped it. If he would have caught it, we would have won the game. So, we go back even to last year when it's a year when they stunk and figure out some way they could have won 3 or 4 more games. So it really does become about some stupid version of luck at some point, right?
Yeah, it does. I mean, that's a big part of it. Don't get me wrong, but then at the same time, I look at this roster right now and look, there are plenty of solid to good players. There are guys who have some upside. There are guys who have really, really impressive pedigrees, but just a couple things continue to stick out in my mind, and this is what makes me uneasy. And I think if you were honest, I think John Harbaugh and Ozzie Newsome would say the same thing.
Sure.
That one, you're counting on a lot of older players, which can be a good thing and it can be a bad thing. It can be a good thing because you do have some guys who've been through some wars. They've added the likes of Eric Weddle and Ben Watson and Mike Wallace, who failed his conditioning test, and I know a few fans are going to freak out about that, but probably not a big deal. Was very close to passing it. I didn't get a sense that John Harbaugh was overly concerned about that. But when you're counting on those older players, the flip side of that is, as much as you talk about track record and pedigree, it can be very fleeting and it can go away very quickly with older players. Very fair questions to ask of Terrell Suggs, who even acknowledged that as he finally broke his silence, and certainly you can check out those comments in the Buy a Toyota audio vault. But Steve Smith, questions about him, questions about, can Elvis Dumervil continue to play at a high level? I mean, just go down the list. You just have so many questions, and at the end of the day, the same question that we asked last year applies once again in 2016. Who are going to be this team's playmakers in crunch time? They have guys capable. They have guys who are talented enough. But I think the Ravens themselves are even wondering who is going to really be those select few who are making the game-changing plays.
Who's making the back shoulder on 3rd and 8, right?
Right. Who's intercepting that pass, as you mentioned, a one-possession game, as so many times the Ravens had an opportunity to either seal a game or make a big play to change the outcome of those one-possession games, and they just couldn't do it. So until we see some of that, and even in the preseason, I'm not sure how many conclusions you draw from that. I think this is a season where I could see them going 11-5. I could see them going 7-9, and I think they're going to be better than last year, assuming they don't have the same ridiculous run of health issues that they had a year ago. But at the same time, I think they're for some national types, I think assume the Ravens will bounce back. I think a lot of that has to do with track record, and that's fair. They've earned that right. But at the same time, I do look at this roster, and I'm not just convinced that they just show up week 1 against the Buffalo Bills and suddenly they're back to being a contender. A lot of questions that need to be answered on a variety of levels between now and then.
Amazing how many national writers I had on, and you know this from going to the Super Bowl, from going to the Combine. Every person we sit down with who covers football, we would say to them, we're from Baltimore Ravens. You got Ozzie, you got John, you got Flacco will be back, you'll be fine. Well, this is the time where you find out whether you're fine or not, and to your point, we made a big deal about the draft. We went out to Indianapolis. They drafted 11 guys. I mean, they got guys running around out there. They're not all going to make the team. And I think Harbaugh is pretty candid about that. And this kind of camp with this kind of opportunity for so many different players, who's to say who is going to emerge? they don't even know who their running back is, right? And let's start with that. They don't really know who their 2 or 3 wide receivers will be. Part of that's going to be where Steve Smith is, where Perryman is. It's 5.5, 6 weeks of questions here, and that's what's going to make the camp so compelling, and made even more compelling by the backdrop of the Orioles being in the pennant race, right? So, I mean, the city right now, beginning today, this should be a glorious couple of months to be a Baltimore sports fan. I mean, it hasn't happened often where we have a relevant baseball team and a football team that is interesting in a division that's also interesting, because I don't see Cincinnati or Pittsburgh as being tremendous. There's no 14-win team in this division right now.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. I mean, even without Le'Veon Bell, with his recent suspension, I mean, Pittsburgh has the best offense in the division. I think that much is clear. Cincinnati took some hits this offseason. They lost a couple players via free agency, and you wonder how they're going to recover from their meltdown in the playoffs if they have a little bit of a hangover there. I think that's a valid question for that franchise especially. Now as you are 5 years into this one and done in the playoffs, and then with the Ravens, I mean, as we said, I mean, the pedigree's there. The potential is there, I think, but they need some of these older players coming back from injuries to look like they used to look. Terrell Suggs can't be done, or I really have major concerns about this pass rush. Smith,
I mean, add it up now. Pitta, Suggs, Smith, then you add the 3 Ws, Weddle, Wallace, Watson, right? Out of the 6 of those guys, they are that veteran thing we're bringing in. 1 or 2 of them probably either not going to play well or be injured, right? I mean, like that, and starting with Pitta, right?
Yeah, you would think so. I mean, everyone's rooting for Dennis Pitta.
Everyone.
But the good news with him, unlike some of those other guys you mentioned, you have a lot of depth at tight end. I mean, if Dennis Pitta can't play, they still have Ben Watson and Crockett Gilmore and Max Williams, who came on late last year. So I think anything you get from Dennis Pitta is a luxury, and I hope to God he just stays healthy first and foremost. But you need to have some of those older guys still be major contributors, and probably more importantly, they need some younger guys to pop. You need C.J. Mosley to not just be a good player for you. He needs to become a leader of that defense now as the Mike linebacker and become special. He doesn't have to be Ray Lewis. To expect him to be that is completely unfair, but he needs to be a guy that was a Pro Bowler as a rookie and now takes a couple more steps forward. Brandon Williams we know about. They need a couple more guys. They need Jimmy Smith. That's a huge one we haven't mentioned. They need him to play like the number 1 shutdown corner that they paid him to be last year.
In his prime, by the way. Right?
Yeah, and he needs to show that he is completely over the Liz Frank issues. So, he had the screws removed from the foot back in the spring. That wasn't considered a major procedure. He's not on the PUP list, so he's going to be on the field, and we'll see how he looks. But they need some younger players to grab the brass ring and become the leaders, the best players on this team. They Hall of Fame guys, that's you can't expect that. But this team needs a new core. Ray Lewis is gone. Ed Reed is gone. Haloti Ngata is gone.
Long gone.
Terrell Suggs, most likely the Terrell Suggs of 5 years ago, gone. Whatever he might be now, who knows? So they need some other guys. They have a quarterback. So, that first and foremost gives you more hope than any other team that would be in a position like the Ravens coming off a 5-11 season. But they need some other special players to emerge, and it's got to be at least a couple young guys. It can't just be the older players that they're counting on.
Now, you chatted with Suggs on Wednesday night as they sort of kicked off camp. Any first observations there?
Boisterous, a few expletives that I had to go through and
edit out,
so we don't get in trouble with the FCC. But I think Terrell Suggs. It was interesting because I talked to you about this quite a bit last year, long before the injury. He was so introspective, so almost nostalgic about his career around this time last year. And I'm talking before he got hurt, and really sounded like a guy who was contemplating hanging it up after 2015. He never said that, but that was just something that just reading his body language, the way he talked about his career, sounded like someone very close to the end, at least on Wednesday. And who knows? We're waiting for him to get back on the practice field. Going to be a little while now, at least a few days before they activate him from the PUP list. But he sounded like a guy who has no interest in this being his last season. I mean, he sounds like a guy who's motivated, talked a good game, talked about how much he missed football. I thought from a conditioning, from a weight standpoint, I thought he looked okay. He didn't look maybe as ripped as I've seen him in the past from a muscle standpoint, but I've seen him look heavier before this time of year. But he sounded like someone absolutely motivated and someone who's heard the naysayers talk about the fact that he's going to be 34 years old, 14th season in the league, coming off his second Achilles in 4 years. So he talked a good game, but ultimately how he plays on the field will really prove how much he really has left. But sounds like a guy who has no interest in this 2016 being his farewell season by any stretch.
Luke Jones will be in Owings Mills. We will be monitoring all things Orioles baseball as they head north of the border after a quick trip to Minnesota. And the Ravens will be practicing on Monday night out at the ballpark and fireworks. And it's not going to take long, right? I mean, we wait for it to begin. Once it begins, it really begins, right? It's like shot out of a gun every single day. There's going to be some Ravens news. And we're going to be playing preseason football games in 2 weeks, man.
Yeah, and you hope there's not a whole lot of news the first week and a half or so, because that generally means bad things. That generally means someone carted off the field, and you certainly don't want to see that. We'll see. I mentioned Mike Wallace. The other story that came out of Wednesday, Jake Long, who they had agreed to terms with, but as we pointed out, with his knee history, some questions about the physical that did arise over his knee. So he's seeing Dr. James.
Yeah, I was going to say, when you hear those two words, James Andrews, it's not. Yeah,
so we'll see. And this is why some people that were jumping the gun a little bit, saying, "Oh, Jake Long can play left tackle and Ronnie Stanley can move the guard." I was never buying that. I'm still very skeptical of that. The Ravens are still optimistic they'll get something done, but I think just the concerns that were brought up. One, we'll see how they word a contract as far as any guarantees as far as injury or anything like that. But two, if this guy can stay healthy and just be an upgrade over James Hurst, then God bless. The Ravens will be a better football team then. So we'll see how that plays out over the next few days. But hopefully the WNST.net tech service is fairly quiet from a Ravens standpoint over the next 10 days. Probably not going to see any roster moves of note. I mean, 89th, 90th player on the roster moves. We're not sending that out because you've never heard of any of those players anyway. But hopefully not sending that text about someone getting carted off the field, someone getting hurt. So, but you're right. This will pick up very, very quickly. First day of full contact will be on Saturday. And then stadium practices, 2 of them over the next week or so. And before you know it, we'll be talking about the preseason opener and really getting things going. So right now, I think all eyes on Joe Flacco these first couple of days, but all signs pointing to at least so far so good with the Ravens quarterback being back on the field, and just good to see number 5 back out there after some of the quarterbacks the Ravens had to send out there over the final 6 games of the season last year in just a lost 2015 campaign.
In the words of our partner, Brian Billick, don't touch my quarterback. Leave him alone, right? So
absolutely.
Yeah, the guy in the red shirt, don't hit him, whatever we do. All right, Luke can be reached, Luke at WNST.net. I am Nasty at WNST.net. Together we're out on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram. Anywhere you are, we'll be there for you, including breaking news on the WNST Tech Service. We hope that we don't have to use that one very often from out in Owings Mills, but it is all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And, of course, Dennis will be here this Thursday and every Thursday from 3 to 5, driving you home. Morning newspaper still serves you up at 7 a.m. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. Still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life. And, of course, anything you miss here, you can find on my Facebook Live thread as well as our WNSTV channel on YouTube, and always in the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault at WNST.net. Can't ask for more as we enter early August and late July. First place Orioles, Ravens on the field. Life is good in the land of pleasant living. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Taos in Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.